Okay, this is it. This is your final task, and really this is a bit of a transition over from the end of this module and helping you get prepared for gathering your RPL evidence for your delivery module. So a little bit of a crossover there. What we need to do finally is to trial these basic assessment tools that you've created. So you've just created your Susan RPL mapping, and you, I would hope, have at least mapped the 2.4 where you've ticked it in the question column and then attempted at least one question, ideally more than that. You've written that question in the correct performance criterion in black text, and then you've benchmarked your response in red text and you've ticked the question column. So let's just visually, instead of auditorily, see what that looks like. So there was the example of the question in 2.4, so you will have ticked that there, and you're ticking it again by hitting caps lock and P, and that makes the tick come. And for your other question or questions that you've added, because you needed to create a basic assessment tool, and questions are a basic assessment tool, and the tool comprises of the question that you ask and the benchmarked response. So we're just making sure that you've written a question in the performance criterion that you've chosen in black, then you've created in red text a benchmarked response, and that you had then gone and ticked when this one will have said questions. You've actually ticked across there. That one says third party because it was an old version. Okay, that was just to visually show you what the instruction was. So now that we've done that and you've answered another question there, you will be trialling it with each other. So you'll see here now I've embedded, this is contextualized specifically for your learner group, so other learners won't be getting this YouTube demonstration now. So I've created Barry's assessment record just for this one particular unit, and that also contains his observation checklists for all of the delivery modules, so that'll give him a good heads up this week. Now this one over here is your questions. This is the one that I want you to insert with your questions. So let's open that one to start with. This is a full assessment report. Okay, so you can see the unit code, the title, make a presentation. You need to put in your candidate's name. So there is 10 of you in this learner group. Work out among you who you're going to swap with and make sure everyone gets a chance to be a candidate on this assessment report. So, you know, if you list the first 5 names and then the final 5 names and just marry up like that, however you want to do it, I'm happy with. And then you put your name as the assessor. You'll see that I'm down as the supervising assessor because I'm certified in Certificate 4 and I've designed this assessment. Now, the assessment report comprises of the assessment plan, mapping, so that's the mapping that you'll embed from your Susan's RPL document we just opened, the tools, okay, the tools being the observation checklist and your assessment tools, which were your questions, and they were embedded in your mapping. There's a report on whether it's competent or not yet competent, and some feedback to your candidate and feedback that they can offer you. Now, this document is one that we're a private RTO. We don't have access like you will to free tools being a school RTO. So your documents essentially might look very different. You are welcome to use our templates because you've trained in them, and you will have access to template versions. You can just change the Evoke logo to your own. But just bear in mind that working on these ones is a transferable skill. The purpose is to understand the concepts and the functions of each field, and you will be able to appreciate your own RTO forms that you fill out. So this document section looks familiar. We've already worked on the assessment plan for Susan. So for yourselves as well, we're recognising a current existing competence. This is linked to your recognised prior learning. We may have to establish if competence is achieved following learning, but look, I honestly think with this particular unit, we're very, very safe. So we'll get rid of that. And this will lead to your qualification, so we can tick that as well. We're both on board, the assessor and the candidate, on the purpose of this assessment. It's to achieve a qualification. Now the context, different for you guys than it was for Susan. She didn't have a workplace available. She was simulated with e-learning. You are all together at the same work site, so we're using the context as the workplace. So you need to put in your school's name and the address. You also need to add, as well as the candidate as being the person notified, you need to put supervising assessor Cheryl Hall and your principal, who is like Mike in case 2 study for John. He's the boss, right? So we need to put the employer's name down as well. He is a client as well. So then we have the assessment methods that we're choosing. This is still part of the planning. So it's possible that there might be some real work, real time activities in the workplace observed. That's certainly the case for Adam, and possibly something we would look at for you guys as well. But, especially if you could sit in on 1 or 2, the first 40 minutes of a class, it's not necessary. Honestly, your teacher's registration would be fine. So if you're not going to do that, you just take that off with the highlighter. But this one is really, apart from those RPL documents like your teacher's registration, we are trialling that assessment tool, that basic assessment tool you created. We're trialling your questions. So under the questioning, you will interview each other with those select questions that you've created. And what you're doing is you're just swapping with each other and asking each other. You've probably chosen different performance criterion, you've chosen different questions and benchmarks, and essentially we're experiencing assessing, and we're experiencing checking to make sure that the question's clear and that it's relevant to the performance criterion. You'll see here under review of products, we've got your current teacher registration and qualification. So that's the end of the planning now. You have to insert your RPL mapping here. So what we can do with that is we go back to your YouTube document and we grab a copy of the one you've just completed for Susan. So we'd highlight that, right-click, copy, and then we would paste that in. So to paste it in, just right-click, paste. It might take a moment to come across, and it will just come out there as an icon. Then you can double-click on that and, access it and ask the questions. Now, when you've asked the questions, I did have that open here, so let's just go back in and use the example. All right. So say you had created this question in the 2.4. This is the one where you have to tick under the questions there. That is an older version than the one I've created for you today. So that would have question, you would tick by hitting caps lock P, and that would make that question come up as part of your mapped assessment methods. But you would ask the question, what are 3 effective communication techniques you employ? And don't forget, these are keywords, okay? These are guides. So if they're using other terms, then that's fine. You can just record what they've actually replied with. Okay, so maybe they called it check for understanding. Okay, so that's a little bit vague. You would then ask them to elaborate on that. Well, what do you mean by that? And then they'll say, oh, I employ the heads and shoulders exercise, that's 2 minutes, blah, 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 visual, blah, blah, blah. So once you have that, that would be one, and, then they're talking about, they might do a thumbs up. We know then that that's body language. Whatever they're saying, so long as you as an expert, because you are an expert in persuasive communication techniques as a teacher, as long as they give you 3 that marry up with that, or are satisfactory, then what I want you to do at the end, change the colour and just put satisfactory. If it's not quite satisfactory yet, you just put not satisfactory, okay? And then once you've completed all of your questions with each other, save that. Come back into our document. Now this is your self-reflection part. So this is where you want to say, and I would self-reflect now on that 2.4 and say, I should have had words to the effect of before I put the keywords. So I'm going to self-reflect at 2.4, include before the keywords, okay? So I can see an area for improvement there. So, you might have changed the questions, you might have changed the benchmarks or expanded on the benchmarks. As well, in your self-reflection, you notice whether the candidate was not yet satisfactory in an answer. And, you might talk about the enabling questions. So that self-reflection process is a form of evidence for me without me directly observing you performing that task. Okay? So once you've done that, you can start gathering your candidates, ask them to gather for you for this assessment report, and you will supply your portfolio of evidence to them. And this is where we're starting to gather your current teacher registration, any qualifications in education, so your bachelor's degree, any postgraduate degrees, certificates, diplomas. We need a driver's license or a passport. We need your birth certificate, and we need all those 4 documents cited and signed and dated by Richard, please. So you could just photocopy those. He can date and sign it. And then if you could just electronically scan it into a PDF file and just embed that here. So once again, to do that, you would go Insert, Object, Create from File, Browse. Maybe if you've stuck it on your desktop, for example, whatever the file actually is. Let's just say it's this one. Then display it as an icon. You can see it's there. So I can then open that up and save it to your student records. Okay. Now, again, if you have any PowerPoints that your candidate wanted to provide you as evidence of product, you would go through that same process and insert as an icon the PowerPoints there. Now you'll see with the assessment tools, you already created an assessment tool, which was the questions. And the observation is below. So we need your candidate's name again, because this is a sort of a separate tool within your report. And we've got your name as well. And under the assessor's name, we've got the unit of competency code, that's fine. Your workplace name again, the date that you're conducting these verbal questions. And, oh, actually, you don't have to do this bit because this is the part for Adam with the direct observation. My apologies. So you don't have to fill out that. So what we do is just remove the observation checklist and we just tick that we did instead supply the questions because we've got all of the RPL evidence as well. So once we get to the end, I'm sorry, for your candidate, let's just keep it simple so we're not confused and we can remove that. So just click on there. I'll just remove it for you now. There we are. So we have our questions embedded in the mapping. Finally, we make an assessment decision. Are they competent or not yet competent? If they're not yet competent the first time, if they need to go away and think about some of those questions and reply again, you would meet up with them again and you could insert the date of that second resubmission and hopefully they're competent at that time. Further evidence required might be just, resubmit answers to verbal questions. You might give them some feedback on those verbal questions. Look, you've got 2 of those right, but we're after just a third example, blah blah blah. You might create much simpler basic questions by doing what I've provided to you with your multiple choice A, B, C. And that would even make it much simpler than the keyword option. And hopefully they'll be able to get it first crack. So if there's any gaps, strategies for further improvements hopefully will be not applicable. And then, the fact that you've discussed the findings, whether you found that their responses were satisfactory or not. And bearing in mind that I've guided you that it's very strong evidence with their current teachers registration, that with the questions would be enough to judge them competent. So all you would have to do, you could perhaps shade that cell and you could give it a tick. There we are. Or just, shade it. If you're hand printing it, just give it a tick or a circle. That's fine so long as it's quite distinguished as being the selection. So that is an assessment report, and that helps us see that you've trialled your basic assessment tool. So we're gathering so much evidence already for you, and you're really understanding this vet sector style of assessment, very different from a K-12 curriculum where we've got, criterion matrices. This is simply a satisfactory response or a not yet satisfactory response, and when we've got all of our benchmarks and our tools there, our questions, our products that have all been satisfactory or not, the final judgment overall is then competent or not yet competent. And best practice is you make sure that they're 100% satisfactory in each assessment tool. So well done. I'll let you work now on gathering all of that evidence, and I'll speak to you soon.